Assalamu alaikum viewers. My name is Fuzail Zubaid Ahmed. I'm the host for this, moderator for this webinar. This webinar is about, in this webinar we'll discuss the economic and trade relations between Pakistan and Bangladesh. Trade, economics and investments. So if you look at the figures, it appears that the trade could improve. So whether this trade could improve or to what level this trade investments and overall economic relations could improve, let's hear our guests. So with us we have Mr. Reza Kibriya. He's got over three decades experience in macroeconomic management and fiscal policy issues, working in international agencies, governments and universities, IMF included. So I'm going to first there will be a video that will be played, and after the video I'll start asking questions from Mr. Reza Kibriya.
Since 1971, Pakistan and Bangladesh have been linked to each other by bonds of history, culture and faith. And over the past few years, bilateral trade between the two countries has steadily been growing. According to data provided by the State Bank of Pakistan, in 2019, Pakistan's exports to Bangladesh stood at $736 million, while Bangladeshi exports to Pakistan were at $44 million. In the fiscal year 2019-20, the bilateral trade between Bangladesh and Pakistan reached approximately $544 million. A majority of these exports to Bangladesh include cotton yarn, machinery, oil, plastics and mechanical appliances, while major Bangladeshi exports to Pakistan include textiles, agriculture products, and leather products. However, in an attempt to further promote bilateral trade, Pakistan and Bangladesh decided to finalize a free trade agreement. This will help in the transformational economic vision of developing Pakistan as a hub for commercial and investment activities and into a reliable node connecting various sub-regions of Asia with the help of Bangladesh, whose economy is at a stage wherein its businesses can move out and invest in other countries.
Welcome back, Mr. Kibriya. I'll start asking questions. Please tell us, how do you think or whether there is a potential that is left out for the trade and investments between Bangladesh and Pakistan? Do you see a potential, a higher potential, or you think there is none? Please.
I think there is great potential. I'd first say that I would look on the situation as one. The bad news is that it has remained at a relatively low level even after so many years of effort and good relations between our two. The good news is it gives us a huge upside. I only see considerable progress, but there are some issues. I think the range of exports from Bangladesh and the volume is still very low, and I think some actions need to be taken to improve that. One thing that is probably we need a little bit more of is goodwill and a cooperative approach between our two nations' governments. There are some difficulties there from geopolitical pressures that perhaps could prevent the relations progressing as rapidly as they should. But I think that the economic forces will eventually push much greater cooperation between our countries. My experience when I was working at the IMF, I was asked to do an analysis of ASEAN and the trade prospects. But I was doing this long ago in about 1987. And I remember then that the progress in terms of trade between the countries was very low until about 1990. And then after the period that I was studying, the trade really began to grow. And trade, in fact, in the same SITC classifications. For example, trade in Europe is often between the same commodity classifications. Cars from Germany to France and vice versa. These are very large trade items. I think with branding and with quality improvements and with product differentiation, I think even within the same SITC classifications, there is very good prospect for expanding trade between our countries. What I think is the main problem is some administrative, logistical issues, they still hold us up. For example, there are no direct shipping routes between Pakistan and Bangladesh, which I find quite incredible given our shared history and the close links that trading houses in East and West Pakistan had in those days. How these have disappeared completely is it's very disturbing, and I am puzzled as to why, after so many years of the division between the two countries, after so many years, we still have not been able to patch together those trade links. This is incredible. The second thing is a direct air connection. This is vital. And again, there is a lot of cooperation that is needed from the Bangladesh and the Pakistan authorities to support a direct air connection. We need to have more trade fairs and ways for our businessmen to be seeing your products and your businessmen to be seeing what Bangladesh produces. I think the very narrow range of products exported from Bangladesh shows perhaps a lack of information in Pakistan as to what Bangladesh can produce now. Bangladesh today is not what it was 30 or 50 years ago. We produce a large range of fairly high quality consumer products that are being exported around the region and in fact around the world. To give you some examples, pharmaceuticals, ceramics, very high quality shoes, sports shoes. We have factories, Korean factories and other factories in Bangladesh that produce the top quality athletic shoes. And there are various areas here, I think, where I think the lack of trade is due to a lack of information. And within our two countries, I would be very happy to see much more movement of businessmen, of tourists, and of the people involved in the administration, because there is great goodwill in this country for Pakistan for various complicated reasons, but there is very great goodwill, and that is not being reflected in our trade, investment, and economic relations. Frankly, the Bangladesh-Pakistan Chamber of Commerce, I have never heard about it. They don't have the visibility that we would expect from a large and important neighboring country. I don't see that. I must criticize there. And trade fairs, I don't know where the problem lies, whether it is our government or yours, but I think trade fairs would be very helpful in boosting these relations. Pakistani investors may also find that Bangladesh has certain very great advantages in some sectors, and it may be helpful, for example, for textile manufacturers to diversify and go into certain sectors in Bangladesh. Our wage rates are extremely low, so there is that incredible advantage. We have a fairly large of skilled workers in certain sectors that your investors can take advantage of. And I'm sure they would be covered under the normal protection of the Board of Investment. So that's something that's done. But I think basically I'm dissatisfied with the flow of information between our two countries, the flow of people and of information, because despite that groundswell of great goodwill, policymakers have not been able to utilize that successfully to tie our two countries together. I look on Pakistan as a gateway to a very rich and prosperous region, or future. It certainly will be even more prosperous. Afghanistan, Iran, Turkey in particular. And on our side, I think that Pakistani manufacturers should look on Bangladesh as an entree into the ASEAN and the very rich East Asian markets. I think we will benefit mutually if we can use this geographical distance here can be a boon. It can give us entree into markets that we would otherwise not have easy access to. But the first things first, you first have to get a proper shipping lines to operate between Karachi and Chittagong, because sending goods through other countries obviously raises costs and makes it difficult for many very high quality manufacturers from both countries to reach the other country.
Again, very interesting points, Mr. Kibriya. Being a Pakistani, I can say that Pakistanis do not have any kind of, we're neutral. So we look for, we are a high consumption society. We look for products that are made anywhere. If they are good in quality, we'll buy them. So it's okay. What do you think? Very interesting points you have highlighted. Is there any way the governments or their policies could influence the businessmen to, start exchanging business relations, the communication could improve? So is there anything the governments could do, economic policies of both governments? You've been at IMF and you've seen this, this trade at a, at a high altitude. So you should be, you'll be able to tell us how governments can influence the businessmen to forge some kind of working relationship and benefit each other's population.
I think both our countries are under certain geopolitical pressures. Okay, I couch it in this language. I hope the listeners can figure it out. Particularly our government is under certain very strong pressures to follow certain policies and we have very powerful countries telling us who we can be friends with and who we can have strong relations with. I can't put it more bluntly than that. And that is an issue. So despite our officials and our businessmen and our people wanting much closer links, commercial links to Pakistan, there are some problems. So you have to keep that in mind. The other thing is that we were hopeful when SAARC started that this would be a great boon for both our countries. But it hasn't worked out like that. The reason is quite obvious. It's due to political differences with our large neighbor. But it's been a great disappointment. My father, Shah M.S. Kibriya, actually wrote the position paper for SAARC. And he presented it at the Foreign Secretary's meeting in Colombo in 1980. And I think that set the whole ball rolling and heads of state got involved. He was a great believer in regional integration. He was one of the founding directors, if you know this organization called RCD, Regional Cooperation for Development, between Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan. And he worked as Undersecretary General based in Bangkok for Asia and the Pacific for the United Nations. And the power of cooperative economic arrangements is something that he felt very strongly about. And for Bangladesh, he wanted us to be a part of any strong grouping that existed. Unfortunately, there are some structural flaws in SAARC which have not allowed the real potential of this potential regional powerhouse to be developed. And there is that issue. But I am very hopeful. You have to remember that these things start slowly, and at our level of industrial development, the trade linkages take some time. As I mentioned to you before, ASEAN only started to take off after the first 15 years of relatively modest growth in trade between Indonesia and Thailand and the Philippines. It was very modest in the early years. But as their industries started developing, as their manufacturing sectors grew, as their the consumer society developed in these countries, the levels of trade started growing at high double-digit figures each year, about 15 to 20%, whereas before they'd grown at about 2 to 4%, which is pretty negligible in terms of value. So this will come, but I think that we need to do we need to take some actions. The leadership of both our countries has to get their act together. And on the Bangladesh side, the concern remains about the trade imbalance. So I think Pakistan should also recognize that and make every effort to give our manufacturers a chance to compete in Pakistan and provide high quality goods that you would be, I'm sure, I don't know if you have ever visited if you've ever visited Dhaka, but you'd be quite interested to see the range of high quality consumer and light manufacture items that are being produced. You would be a bit startled by, because it's not what you expect of Bangladesh, which is supposedly a very poor country and very backward. But the sophistication of our manufacturing sector will come as a surprise to you. And I think we will be able to compete quite successfully on a level footing with other countries in the Pakistani market.
Excellent, Mr. Kibriya. Coming from the business background myself, I can assure you that Pakistani businessmen will welcome these opportunities. And you're right, something has to give. But do you see, this is one last question, you have taken the tempo of this webinar very high. We'd like to maintain this tempo from now on. But do you see any thawing of the relations between the two governments or the businesses, or you think a lot more needs to be done or could be done or is being done?
I am an optimist by nature. As Winston Churchill once said, I'm an optimist because it's pointless being anything else. I'm a great optimist in much stronger relations between our two countries because it will be sustained not by the wish of any individual leader. It will be sustained by the goodwill that exists between the peoples of our two countries, the business communities of our two countries. I am very confident about that. And I feel if you give a little more attention and emphasis on the points that I gave about for example, the Pakistan-Bangladesh Trade Chamber of Commerce here, I think it needs to be rejuvenated a bit and geared up. And there is a sense that things will be blocked or will be hindered by others. But you have to remember that there are some people who are against closer relations between our two countries. You have to accept that there are. But I'm telling you that the majority of people and the majority of businessmen in this country want much closer relations with Pakistan. I even foresee we have a growing and increasingly rich middle class. I even see tourism prospects for Pakistan. There's so many beautiful places I've only visited a few, but I've seen pictures on the internet of some very, very beautiful places and superb infrastructure to support them. And I think that even if you could get to work on that, you'd have tourists from Bangladesh visiting Pakistan, and that would actually strengthen the links between our two countries.
Generally, the two things, one is tourism, the other is sports, which could, front run this business to business linkages. Bangladeshi cricketers playing in PSL, Pakistani cricketers playing in BPL. That's a very common sight. Pakistanis love watching BPL. Fantastic tournament. I'm sure PSL is watched by many in Bangladesh. Thank you, sir. I'll come back to you in a while. So we have with us Dr. Karim Khan. He's Associate Professor at Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, and he specializes in trade, migration, governance, and institutions, conflict, and political economy. Welcome, Dr. Karim. You've heard Mr. Kibriya. I mean, he took the tempo of this discussion at great heights. Please, I'm at a loss of words to even develop a question for you. Please.
Okay, thank you. And actually, it was a very nice discussion which was made by Kibriya. And let me add the discussion a bit in 3 points. In the first point, let me discuss the volume of trade that Pakistan has currently with Bangladesh.
Sound
onwards, I will try to talk on the potentials, actually, which was already raised by Dr. Kibriya. And finally, let me say something about the free trade agreement with Bangladesh. So far as the volume of trade between the Bangladesh and Pakistan is concerned, it has been very low. It is not that large. It has remained stagnant and ranging around 600 million to 700 million per annum. And as said by Kibriya, actually it is in favor of Pakistan. I mean that Pakistan is on average exporting around 600 to 7 million dollars per annum in comparison to Bangladesh exports to Pakistan, which is Pakistani imports, which is usually has been less than 100 millions during the last decade. So the trade volume is very small, as is shown by the data. Likewise, if you see the composition of these exports and imports, it is very concentrated in few products. For instance, Pakistan is mainly exporting cotton and cotton-related products and maybe some machinery, but actually it is very little. Likewise, the imports which Pakistan is importing from Bangladesh, it is rajut and tea and just few products. So first, the volume is low. Second, the composition is very highly concentrated. And as far as the potential is concerned, there are huge potentials in terms of diversification of the products, in terms of the market. Look, Bangladesh is a market. Let me talk from the perspective of Pakistan. Bangladesh is a market of around 170 million people. And actually, they like Pakistani products. So if you see, first, I would say more trade. Or you can say for trade, the most important thing is market access. And both countries have to provide market access to the products of each other. For instance, in terms of communications, in terms of visas, in terms of trade barriers, and similarly non-tariff trade barriers and administrative procedures. Actually, you have to make easiness in these indicators in order to enhance coordination between the businesses of the two countries. Likewise, CPEC, you can say the associated.
Dr. Khan, I'll come back to you this question about this question on CPEC. Here is a thought-provoking question for you. Is it possible that we are looking at the data differently or wrongly? Maybe Pakistan is a supplier, so maybe you're not supposed to see Pakistani goods in the Bangladeshi consumer market. Whatever Pakistan exports to Bangladesh, Bangladesh value adds and sells it to the whole world. So there is a possibility. This is another perspective on looking at the trade surplus, huge trade surplus that Pakistan is running with Bangladesh. Is it possible that Bangladesh is actually having a huge trade surplus, not a deficit?
Yes, of course. If you see that as far as the raw materials part, the Bangladeshi textile garments or cotton industry is concerned, yes, of course, they are benefiting from our exports to them. And Pakistan can enhance it further, or the value addition of Bangladesh can earn a lot of foreign exchange to Bangladeshi investors. This is, of course, the existing potentials which can be expanded. But actually, besides these potentials, there are many products that we can trade in with Bangladesh. For instance, why not primary products like meat, fresh vegetables and dry fruits, and why not cement and our sports goods? Of course, in existing trade, we can be expanded, and there are potential of around $3 billion that can be expanded. But actually, we can diversify as well with these.
Dr. Khan, I'll come back to you. Maybe the way forward is trying to help Bangladesh reduce this trade deficit with us. Is CPEC a good opportunity for Bangladesh to enhance its exports to Pakistan? Bangladesh is linked to the world through Pacific Ocean, and the route to Europe is much longer. Gwadar, CPEC, you have a shorter route to Eastern Europe, even Central Europe, Northern, Eastern, Central Europe. So is there a potential, in your opinion, for Bangladesh to increase its exports to Pakistan and through Pakistan to this region?
Look at here. CPEC and the associated special economic zones offer Bangladesh three opportunities. First, if you see, in special economic zones, we have offered a lot of incentives in terms of exemptions and tax reliefs to businesses. So Bangladeshi investors might be very much interested to invest in these zones. So this is the first potential. Likewise, if you see CPEC, the potentials from CPEC is access to Central Asian markets and the markets of Western Africa. So Bangladeshi businesses would be very much interested in this route for their exports, so they can get access to the markets of Central Asia and Western Africa, and maybe at a very cheaper cost as compared to their other routes. So, and the third opportunity that CPEC offers to the businesses is joint ventures to Pakistani with the Pakistani businesses, in particular in the textile and garment sector. So that can be a potential benefit for both for businesses on both sides of the border.
I'm going to refer to Mr. Kibriya again, and pose you, sir, this interesting question that if Bangladesh looks at Pakistan as a kind of raw material supplier, and then looks at the benefit that Bangladesh gets from Pakistan and the possibility of expanding that benefit, and also this indication by Dr. Khan that due to CPEC, your exports can be targeted to Central Asia, Europe, and Africa.
I think that the point Dr. Khan raised about joint ventures is a very good one. But a little hand-holding is needed here, and governments of both countries need to help. The introductions, building up relationships. I think where there are trade relationships between countries, we can foresee joint ventures being based in Pakistan and in Bangladesh that would mutually benefit our economy. But I think that for that to happen, relations in the business community have to be strengthened greatly. I am hopeful that some of the old trading can be rebuilt, although it's been many years since it was cut off. But the goodwill between the countries, again, I am banking on that to allow the restoration of these trading relationships. Once you have a trading relationship of trust, then only joint ventures become much more possible. And I'm very hopeful that this will happen in the future. As I mentioned at the outset, to open up the Central Asian and West and North African and Middle Eastern markets. And on this side, I think Pakistan can look to Bangladesh to assist in opening up to the East Asian markets. In the end, as an economist, I feel Bangladesh must look east for the main impetus of its economic development for obvious reasons. It's a much more dynamic region, and the rates of growth and the rates of industrial development and high value added industries are in this region rather than to our immediate west. So we have that issue. But if we go a bit further afield to Pakistan, I think again we can see some very strong economic prospects based on the strong relations, trade, diplomatic and economic relations that Pakistan has with most of its neighbors, in good relations. So we would hope to capitalize on that, frankly. So there's mutual interests here. I think that it's not the decision of a particular leader or leaders that determines these things. I think it's the weight of economic logic that absolutely conditions our view of Pakistan. This is a country that we must work with, and that we must use the synergy of our two economies to benefit greatly. I think that we can do that. So the joint venture issue is a very good one, but I think we need to get rid of some of the administrative pitfalls. Free trade agreements are fine, but I think we need to negotiate these very carefully. In Bangladesh, there would be lobbies within Bangladesh and in certain other economies that would feel threatened by giving access to Pakistani manufacturers. Frankly, sometimes the competition is not desired by a third country producer in different sectors. So you can readily imagine that. A country that has preferential access will worry about another country which is equally resourceful having that sort of preferential access. So there are powerful lobbies, but we must build up, we must concentrate, and I've spoken to my friends here and elsewhere about this. We must concentrate on building up lobbies that would promote greater, a greater and deeper trade, commercial relationship with Pakistan. Bangladesh has a specific problem that Pakistan doesn't. It's to do with exchange rates. Our exchange rate is very, very strong due to large remittances. It's a bit of the Dutch disease problem Mr. Khan will be aware of. Our exchange rate is overvalued because of large remittances that don't really depend on macroeconomic policies. So we have an exchange rate issue. If our exchange rate was managed differently to support our export sector, then rather than promote imports, I think we would do better as a trading nation.
Dr. Khan, I'm not sure about whether I should be asking you this question, but tell us this ASEAN region being the center of attention. Mr. Kibriya said that Bangladesh's east is where the action lies. So how do you perspective this in our discussion today?
Okay, that's a very interesting point. Actually, I didn't already said about this anything, but actually Kibriya raised this, and that region be even of importance to Pakistani businesses. Why not? If you let's say through Bangladesh, why not we to export to them? Or you can say it, if let's say between Bangladesh and Pakistan the relationships are, you can say the economic relations is enhanced, then of course it is a great potential as a region. As he said earlier, actually it is a Hawaii value addition region. So even Pakistani products are to Pakistani raw materials, they can value add, or you can say it would be of interest to Pakistani exporters, not only in terms of textile, but as well other products as well.
So Bangladesh would not discourage Pakistani investors, industrialists to set up. Already there are many Pakistanis. But if Pakistan had good exchange reserves and Pakistani government encouraged Pakistanis to set up their shop, their manufacturing in Bangladesh, look at their, I think their the cost of labor is roughly the half, Mr. Kibriya, is that right?
Yes,
it's about $80 a month in garments. 80.
And how does that compare with Pakistan, Dr. Khan?
So actually, the cost of labor is low in Pakistan, while the cost of prime material is low in Pakistan. The cost of labor low is in Bangladesh. So labor cost and the demand for Pakistani products in ASEAN will determine what would be the potential advantages to Pakistani businesses from that region. But to me, actually, I would not agree with Dr. Kibriya. Actually, the relationship is built by the governments. The businesses usually don't complain too much about these things. Actually, they are rarely afraid of competition. But actually, if we provide the ground for trade, the businesses would be very much interested on both sides of the border to do joint ventures, to do joint exports, and so on. So,
sorry, Dr. Khan, this is exactly what Mr. Kibriya said. He said business-to-business relationship is going to be easy once the two governments decide that they must forge some kind of trade and investment and economic unity or some union.
Actually, we have to provide the environment, the business environment on both sides of the border. Then the businesses can contact with each other within that environment. And if we enhance confidence building and if we reduce administrative complexities, then the businesses for sure would be very much interested in joint ventures, in joint exports, and so on.
Mr. Kibriya, I have to come back to you. So if Pakistani industrialists invest more in or invest in Bangladesh, I'm sure the government of Bangladesh is not going to discourage them. We could make your cost of labor is $80, ours would be $120, Dr. Khan. So $120. So there is a definite advantage. Cost of electricity is also very competitive in Bangladesh compared to Pakistan. So if Pakistani industrialists set up their manufacturing in Bangladesh, the government is not going to refuse. So this is a very good way forward. It will increase Pakistani exports to Bangladesh and increase Bangladesh's exports to its own east, which is ASEAN. Your word, sir.
We would welcome that, I'm quite sure. I don't think there would be anyone within this country would oppose that. But I think my words, I think, see that within this country, there would be very, very few people who would oppose that and they would welcome it. But I think for the future, as Dr. Khan said, the governments must take the initiatives on this. They must be convinced of the mutual benefits. And sitting as an economist, he and I both agree that the obvious economic benefits are there, but without the political will to push it forward, we're not going to get very far. And that is a big problem. I will just remind you that these things start slowly. Maybe a few actions taken on the basis of today's seminar would be a start. When the European coal and steel community began in 1951, the architects of that never could have envisioned that it would expand so much to create a real union of countries as exists today. So things begin slowly, and as long as there's goodwill and there's a natural logic to these countries working together, I think historical forces will push us in that direction. Political influences or political influences that are negative may exist for a while, but again, I don't think this is a long-term thing because the force of economic logic will force us to do what is best for our two countries. I believe that very sincerely.
Bangladesh's export target for 21-22 fiscal year is $51 billion. So I'm sure Bangladesh is looking at its exports to its east, Australia, the entire Asia Pacific, North America, Europe. So there is an opportunity for Pakistani exporters to set up their manufacturing value addition in Bangladesh and help the country realize its $51 billion target. Your word, sir?
Yes, I think definitely Bangladesh should be very interested in setting up much closer trade links. Our trade commissioners in these two countries, particularly in places like Karachi, and I don't know if you have one in Chittagong, you should, will have to play a big role. But the visits between the two countries' business communities is something I don't see very much. It's not reported, at least. If it does occur, it's not done with much fanfare, and I think that should be done at a level to bring even medium-scale Pakistani businesses back to Bangladesh, and Bangladesh businesses visiting the key industrial regions of Pakistan. You will find that in many people in both countries, in the business communities, there is an impression of the other country that is based on pre-1971 days. Pakistan's industrial capability is underestimated, and similarly in your communities you underestimate Bangladesh is the technical progress that we've made over the years. So that can only be removed through greater interaction between our two countries. And I hope that the visa situation, which I understand has been very difficult, will be eased to facilitate that. But I think that from a relatively low level, this will grow each year. And particularly when you have a very proactive government, it will absolutely rocket in a few years. We will be able to, with a more proactive government in this area, we will be able to make up the lost ground within a few years. I'm confident of that. So yes, there is some lost ground and progress is slow on negotiations and on diplomatic and other relations. But I think that when there's a change and there's a more proactive government, things will improve very quickly.
Mr. Kibriya, again, I'm not a representative of the businessmen in Pakistan, but one thing we don't do is underestimate Bangladesh. Neither we will underestimate Bangladeshi people, their sportsmen, their industrialists, the government. The overall scenario in Bangladesh is not being underestimated in Pakistan. So rest assured, I'm not a representative of Pakistani businessmen, but this is what I can say. Mr. Khan, what do you have to say for what Mr. Kibriya said?
Look at here. We do know that currently Bangladeshi's industries are expanding its operations, and actually they are now in a position to even invest in Pakistan. So I would not underestimate Bangladeshi investment or Bangladeshi businesses. In fact, actually, if you see the origin of this industry in Bangladesh, it is Karachi. So some of the businesses in the garments industry actually shifted to Bangladesh due to the facilities which were offered by the Bangladeshi government. And I appreciate, of course, for businesses their facilities. And similar facilities should be offered by Pakistani government to Bangladeshi investors. They will come here as well. Look at here. For businesses, the most important factor in investment decision is the cost of production. And if you provide a good environment and a good raw material and with efficient or skilled labor force, then businesses go everywhere. So just like Pakistani businesses shifted to Bangladesh, the Bangladeshi businesses can come to Pakistan, but we have to provide the environment which is conducive to business activities in this country. And again, I would say that we have to provide administrative easiness in terms of procedures, and we have to provide quality raw materials at competitive prices. Likewise, we have to provide skills, labor force to them. Otherwise, businesses go there where actually they have the opportunities in terms of expanding their operations.
Very good. Dr. Khan, one last question from you. Bangladesh, as we have learned from Mr. Kibriya, has three great strengths, at least three great strengths in our context. One is the currency stability. He said it's overvalued, but they've carefully been able to defend that value. Bangladeshi taka is fairly stable. This counts as an economic advantage. The second is labor. Third is utilities. How do you see these three strengths of Bangladesh playing their role in developing this relationship between the two countries, trade and economics and investments relationship between the two countries?
Okay, if you see the exchange rate, as is said by Kibriya, actually it is suitable for Pakistani exports. If you see, our exports are looking cheaper to them. So that's why it might be the main reason that our terms of trade are in favor of Pakistan. And second, as far as utilities are concerned, actually both markets are it is not very different in both the countries. To me, I think it is 7 cents per unit of electricity which is offered in Bangladesh, I guess. And similarly, it is not that different in Pakistan. So the cost of utilities across the two countries is more or less the same. Okay. The labor cost is low in Pakistan, but actually, if you compare the raw material cost, it is cheap in Pakistan.
Low in Pakistan?
Low in Bangladesh.
Low in Bangladesh,
but
right.
The cost of raw materials is cheap in Pakistan. So actually, that differences in terms of cost is balanced. If you compare, the cost is not only labor; it is also it also includes the cost of utilities, the cost of raw materials. So the advantage of low-cost labor to Bangladesh is matched by the advantage of low-cost raw materials in Pakistan. So if you see, the firms or the businesses across the two countries are not very different to me. Actually, they are comparable, and we would really appreciate that Pakistani businesses should be in a level playing field to compete with the Bangladeshi businesses. And similarly should be the sentiments in Bangladesh that actually they should lead the Bangladeshi businesses to compete with our local businesses. And actually this competition between the two countries would enhance the competitiveness of both countries across the globe. So we would have a net benefit if you see the dynamic effects of this competition.
Mr. Kibriya, your final words on this subject? The three economic strengths I said were the stability of taka, the second cheaper labor. Dr. Khan doesn't quite agree that electricity prices are lower. I thought they were lower in Bangladesh, but your views?
Yeah, they're somewhat lower.
Somewhat lower.
but also our inflation rates are relatively low.
Yes, that keeps the Bangladeshi taka stable.
Yeah, and it's been low and fairly steady. It's not been really rocketing up very much. So I think in Pakistan, the inflation rate has fluctuated a bit, and that has been something that makes business very difficult. But yes, all of these things are very true, and I think that competition for even in the Bangladesh market by Pakistani goods will be very possible. It's a very open market. Tariff rates in general are quite low, and we have a wide range of imports from our neighboring country, India, as well as from countries such as Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. We have quite a few goods coming from there, even Bhutan. And the range of Pakistani products is maybe not as large as one would have expected. So I think there is potential there. And I think the potential is there because of the quality. From what I've seen of the Pakistani products, the quality compares very favorably with the items that are being sold in Bangladesh by other countries. So yes, I'm very hopeful about that. One final thing I would like to say to Dr. Khan, I would really appreciate it. We have some very good economists like you do at the Pakistan Institute of Development Studies at BIDS. And it would be very good if you could develop more joint activities with them, because I think that we have a lot to learn from you, and perhaps we could also give you a few ideas on how certain things should be managed. The cooperation between our two countries.
It's a very interesting Karan. You could make a beginning between collaboration between PIDE and BIDS.
Actually, if you see Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies and PIDE were originally the same institute. Actually, it is separated after partition. So
Correct.
We have a relationship, but actually I would agree with Zakaria that we should have more of this type of stuff in order to learn from each other, or in order to provide our academic inputs on both sides to our businesses. So that type of cooperation would really improve the things further. I agree. I agree.
You should have at least 1 or 2 joint sessions on a topic that you choose. For example, export diversification or exchange rate management or whatever between your two institutions. At this time, we can only do it by webinar, but in future, we should be able to do it in person. It's very important for the personal contacts, the face-to-face contacts between our policymakers. It's very important. And our BIDS economists there are some very distinguished economists there, and I'm sure they would enjoy this interaction. So may I put this personal request on behalf of our economist community that we would like to see more interaction with the Pakistan economist community.
Actually, I would really look at this point to arrange a webinar in particular on the same theme between the two institutes, and I would really appreciate to invite you in that webinar. I will try my best to arrange at least one.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So we've made some progress on this one issue at least in this webinar.
Yes, okay, there were certain questions that I was supposed to ask Mr. Shamsul Muqtadir. So that's why my FaceTime with both of you is higher than planned. But both of you are saying such interesting things that my questions are coming to my mind. One question that comes to my mind till our producer gives me a cue to stop the webinar. The question that comes to my mind is that Bangladesh's saving rates, domestic saving rates to GDP ratio is being targeted to go in excess of 30%. Mr. Kibriya, 30, 35%?
No. There are two savings rates, and there's some confusion. There's a domestic savings rate.
I'm talking about domestic savings to GDP ratio.
No, domestic savings rate is not that high. Domestic savings rate means the savings of people within the country, and it's at about, as far as I recall, 18% range. The extra 10 or 12% it's the national savings rate, which includes the remittances of our people working abroad, which is huge, and that boosts the national savings rate to the level that you described. Okay, so the domestic rate is not really large.
Okay, great. So thank you for correcting me. So that means that in Bangladesh there is ample capital available, taka and foreign currency both. So Bangladeshi manufacturers might want to, but like you said, the prompt has to come from the government. Somehow encourage the two countries. In Pakistan, as I know, there is no inhibition. So if tomorrow we come to know that Bangladesh, some chamber or their federation of chambers is holding a kind of conference in Pakistan, it will be thronged by Pakistani businessmen. If not thronged, okay, that may be an overish number, but it will be well attended. Similarly, if these things will have to be generated somehow, these businessmen are waiting to be nudged by the governments.
Well, in this area, we need some agents of change, some people who believe in this relationship. Like the people at this webinar, all of us believe that this is important. So let's all work to that. But at the moment, the government is not so proactive. So that's an issue that we need to put more pressure on our government, which is difficult, but we will do our best because it's in the mutual interest of both countries. And certainly it will make our economy stronger, more diversified, and create jobs for our workers. So it's a win-win situation for us and probably for Pakistan as well.
These are excellent words, Mr. Kibriya. I'm sure this webinar is being watched, or will be watched. The recording will be watched by a lot of people. Very interesting, encouraging remarks coming from you. I'll take that as closing words. I'll ask Dr. Khan to give us his closing words, and then we finish off this webinar.
Actually, I would agree with Dr. Riza Zikaria. Actually, it is the idea which becomes Allah. So if we put a good workable idea is the academia, or you can say it, the practitioners are concerned, then definitely the government has to take that idea. So let the works start on this.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me,
very, very near future,
you would
be able to make this idea practical.
Yes. You can ask
in particular for enhancing our economic and trade relations.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Shamsul Muqtadir is with us. Finally, Mr. Muqtadir, can you?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so your invaluable input as I've already given introduction about you. Your invaluable input was missing in this whole discussion about the businessman's point of view from Bangladesh. Please, over to you. The floor is with you.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Actually, I had been to Pakistan back in the year of 2003 and stayed there 11 months as a UNESCO KG Obuchi Research Fellow. So I had the opportunity to travel all over Pakistan, and it was an extremely, enriching experience.
Which year was that?
Enriching experience about, it was 2003. 2003. I was UNESCO KG Obuchi Research Fellow in Pakistan.
Right.
And I have traveled all over Pakistan, and I had lectured in 6 universities. I had 17 lecture presentations throughout 11 months. And I had the opportunity to work with the different cross sections of the people as a researcher.
That's
so
great.
About the economic relations between Pakistan and Bangladesh. Unfortunately, I have missed the major part of your discussion due to a technical problem at my end. But I think something is better than nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
At the end, I would like to, first of all, I would like to, congratulate you for taking this timely initiative. I think Pakistan has a big advantage at its end right at this moment. And that is called CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yes. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which will, that started 8 years ago. And, it's going to get momentum, I believe, within 5 to 10 years. And it's going to be the hub of global trade and commerce. And Pakistan should take into account that this is going to be a big bonus boon in their hands. And about boosting trade between Pakistan and Bangladesh, I think the businessman should come forward. Businessmen should come forward. I am a former CEO to Chittagong Chamber of Commerce. I have seen that regarding business, if you talk about policy, if you talk about the government policies, government will never bother that much for business. Business is the businessman's cup of tea and common people's cup of tea. So entrepreneurs should come forward. Do you get me what I am trying to make?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So let me tell you something about my experience about Bangladesh. I mean, if you would be knowing that Bangladesh government is now fetching more than $50 billion of foreign currency every year.
Yes, true.
And it's booming.
Yes.
It's going ahead. But do you know how did that start? How did that start?
Please.
Actually, it's not only the Bangladeshi entrepreneurs. There are foreign entrepreneurs very involved. They should be given due credit for that. Because in the late 70s, the Koreans, some of the Korean entrepreneurs came to Bangladesh. They invested around, say, about $500,000, $1 million, like this. I mean, several Korean businesses came here, and they had a strategy in mind. They saw opportunity on the horizon. They invested the money, and some of them went out of Bangladesh after 10 years or 15 years with billions of dollars, more than $1 billion. Do you know the largest headgear company in Bangladesh? It's started by a Korean. It's a Yangwon Corporation.
Yes. Okay.
And for about a decade, 20% of Bangladesh's export earning through the apparel industry was owned by the Koreans, entrepreneurs.
Okay.
So they taught the South Korean entrepreneurs. So they enjoyed the quota privilege, the duty-free opportunity of access to European Union and the United States. So what I want to mean is if Pakistani businessmen, or if you as a nation would like to have forged better economic relations with Bangladesh, you should be forthcoming, you should be enterprising, and business community should come forward, because Bangladesh is now going forward like,
breakneck
in a
speed.
booming way.
Yes.
Yeah. And there are many opportunities on the horizon, like in the health service sector, like the agriculture. Another second agricultural revolution is on the horizon. Pakistan has a built-in advantage, the economic advantage in agricultural technology. I have seen, and I visited many places in Pakistan. Pakistan is an agricultural giant, but then its core competency is not, shared with the rest of the world. If you have, say, like, for example, if you have a joint venture, you find a good partner in Bangladesh, and find also a Chinese partner if possible, find a Turkish partner if possible, a Saudi partner if possible. If it is a 3 or 4 partners from 4 different countries, you will have a lot of leverage, because these people already have a supply chain and they have a lot of clout, and the whole world is moving on multilateralism, on globalism. So as global citizens, the world is changing. I mean, those who are, living in the past with those political, overshadowed by past thinking, will abolish in the next 20 years. You see, we are going forward a new world run by technology and economic fundamentals. And world is there. World is, in 2040, the world is going to look different. Bangladesh is going to look different. So, go forward, have a strategic vision, and go forward with that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Shamsul Muqtadir, I have a question. Very interesting thoughts you gave us. So, so you're of the opinion that business-to-business contact can be beneficial even in the absence of government nudging. So,
yes,
what stops these businessmen? What stops Pakistani business from maximum using Bangladeshi economic advantages, competitive advantages. What stops Bangladeshi businessmen, exporters such as yourself, to exploit Pakistani?
Should I be honest?
Please, please.
Should I become honest? Should
Yes.
I become candid?
Yes, please.
If you allow me to be honest, I should tell you that Pakistani businessmen do not wish to leave their comfort zone. I mean, most, and I'm not talking about all of them, but most businesses I have found in Lahore. I mean, in Lahore, there are, a lot of businessmen I have come across. Those who are, well-to-do, have a lot of wealth, and have the capacity to invest, can garner opportunities. They do not wish to come out of their comfort zone. One has to, it doesn't matter how much money you have. I have seen Korean billionaires, Chinese billionaires, those who are working like, they look like poor men. Maybe they look like they do not have money. It should be a passion. Earning money doesn't mean that you are filling your stomach. Earning money means you are producing something, you are helping the world, you are helping humanity. You should try to utilize your talent and your capacity to the full. And the businessman in Pakistan should not forget this. And Pakistan has a lot of opportunities ahead. And it's the elite class and the businessman class should not have the kind of negative perception, should have open-mindedness and spread around the world, because Pakistan is going to be giant as well, like Bangladesh.
Inshallah.
I strongly believe that by 2040, Pakistan and Bangladesh both will become economic giants. And Pakistan has a lot of people, enterprising people. They speak English very well, those who are educated, and they're enterprising, energetic. Only thing they should not have is the kind of, living in the past.
Living in the past.
You know?
I meet a lot of Pakistani businessmen, and at least I haven't heard this, and I meet a lot of them. I haven't heard anybody having any inhibition. But anyway, going a little micro here. You are a tea exporter, am I right, sir?
Yeah.
Mr. Muqtada?
Yeah.
So how about capitalizing on this capacity and exporting? Pakistan imports, I think, over what, $500 million of tea, Dr. Khan? The figure is quite high. We love tea. Pakistanis import, Pakistan imports a lot of tea. So why not start exporting to Pakistan?
Yes, we are exporting to Pakistan. We are exporting to almost every country, to UK, to Turkey, to Iran, to Russia. Tea is going there. And the tea country, the tea factory that I am owning, along with a group of other people, it produces around 3 million kilogram of tea every year. 3 to 5 million kilogram. So this tea is sold in the Chittagong auction market as per law. Right. And then there are exporters, because export is another big business.
Right.
We are just producers. We are producers. We produce the tea, very good quality tea in northern Bangladesh. And we are producing, last year we produced about 15 million kilogram of tea. And it's every year it's increasing by 15%. So northern Bangladesh is now, the second largest tea growing area in Bangladesh. And we are trying to, get this opportunity to, do more and produce more.
So, Mr. Muqtada, we are going to shortly see a trade delegation from Bangladesh coming to Pakistan to discuss relationships, because you are, like you said, you are also involved there with the federation and chambers. So maybe you can arrange a visit.
Chamber of Commerce, and I have seen a lot of opportunities. Bangladeshis are willing to invest. Bangladesh is willing to have joint ventures with other countries. Come forward with a Chinese guy or a Turkish guy or a guy from Turkey. All these non-tariff barriers will evaporate. I'm telling you this open secret. You align with another guy from a third country with whom Bangladesh has a good relation, like Saudi, or from somebody from the Gulf GCC country. You will find a very good reception here. And lot of things to do.
Yeah. Very encouraging words, Mr. Muqtadir, and I have to thank Mr. Kibriya, yourself, Mr. Muqtadir, and Dr. Khan from PIDE. All three of you have really taken this, this discussion beyond my personal expectations. There's a good, strong takeaway from this discussion. I think certain things will happen, will shortly happen between our two countries. There is no stopping. The government can play its role if it chooses to. The two governments can play their role if they choose to. If they don't, even then, money will follow the profit. So there is nothing to fear for the two communities, business communities of Pakistan and Bangladesh, to forge these trade and investment alliances. So with that, I have to thank all three of you. Thank you very much, sir. And look forward to having this webinar again. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, looking forward.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.